Good morning, everybody. I want to do just a quick video. If it becomes a teaching video, you won't get it until, a couple of days when I add all the little verses on. But I'm already working on one. Today is, I looked at it. I think it's Tuesday morning. Yeah, it's Tuesday. And I'm going to have a full day. And those that watch some of the little videos, I'm going to go get Pops $16 worth of food. And Jimmy, my friend, called me last night. And I told him, look, I'll pick you up tomorrow, Jimmy. We'll do some things. And then we'll go, you see Pops at the new place. And so anyway, I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit, a few things. I might share some scriptures. I want to show you some. A few years ago, when I was doing a lot of walking, both in New Jersey, New York City, and here, I would find a lot of stuff on the ground. And most of this, there's some of those things I had, but most of those things were little items I found in New Jersey. Little wheel walking over, I was walking from North Bergen all the way to Hackensack. And I walked also from North Bergen up to the George Washington Bridge, over the bridge. So I was walking a lot. And a lot of those little things were verses. They remind me of verses. And till this day, when I look at them, I'll still remember where I found it, which street, that little wheel. I was walking from North Bergen down to my friends from New Jersey know this. Texas, you won't know. But this is right by the New York City area on the side that you see me take the pictures on the New Jersey side. But I would walk down to Tunley Avenue and walk over to where I used to ride our little dirt bikes, but walk over through all the way to that bridge that goes over the Hackensack River, I believe. But then you're in Hackensack and all the way to that way. My friend Fred used to be a used car salesman on that main drag, and I found that little thing up there. Now, a lot of those little things, stones or gems, and then I'll attach a scripture or a verse. But I have not done any of that in a long time. I still walk, but I purposely think, I don't need to keep picking up stuff, because I'm like, there's something, let me look. The other day I was walking by the island, in a spot where I walked by the water. And I saw, I guess it's a beer top, but it was a star on the ground. And I said, I'm tempted to, check that one out. So I picked it up, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but there were 3 symbols on the back of that. Actually 4. And I said, I'm going to keep that. One is a kite. And a kite, if you go outside early right now, now it's a little overcast. It's early. It's 5:30, but I got up early today. And there's images of stars over the years that I always remember, because if you get up early, yesterday morning I saw out praying, I saw a beautiful shooting star. But big one, big shooting star. Just one right at the end of the prayer time. Maybe it's got something to do with this. And, shooting star, I'm going to quote a verse in a minute. But on that cap, there was a star, and it reminded me of the verse when I gave it to you a few weeks ago, and it came from Balaam. And Balaam was the prophet, but he was a false prophet, the New Testament says, in the letter of Jude and Peter. But yet he had prophecies, and there was a king by the name of Balak who were afraid of God's people when they were going to start coming into the promised land and beating all those enemy armies. And so this one king got Balaam and said, I know you have, you're a prophet, and it's kind of a mixed story, but Balaam could not curse God's people. But then he finally gave advice and said, look, I cannot curse these people, they're God's people, but get them to intermingle with the other women, sleep with the other women of the nations, and they'll curse themselves. And that's the history of Israel, by the way. If I think about it, I'll get to it. But he gave these prophecies. I wrote them down there shall come out of Jacob a scepter, or there shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Judah, and shall smite the corners and destroy all the children. Out of Jacob shall he come that shall have dominion and shall destroy him. It's talking about, that's a prophecy of Jesus. So when I looked at years ago, when I saw those star patterns when I'm praying, well, I think it's the Big Dipper. It's one of the things, but I don't go by that. It just looks like a kite. And I saw it last night, and in the morning I see it. Some I see in the morning, some at night, because I'm up when it's dark, and the last prayer before I eat at night, I go back in the yard and it's dark again. But that always reminded me of a kite. And I saw it years ago, and I felt like it was an image of when we preach and teach and get the Word of God out, whether it's through social media and all these things. It's like the Word's going out. The Word endures forever. And it just reminded me of that. And on that little bottle cap, there's a little kite. And then the other image I always had, for years now, was those old stoplight signs that you see in the Northeast. Now I have one here. It used to be on, I bought it, it used to be on my key ring. That little red and all those things were the same things. I had all these on keychains. When I was walking, they all represented scriptures. I stuck them on that. That verse, because it's like when I grew up as a kid, all those old streetlights, it says, reminds me of, you will dwell in the land of your fathers. Meaning you'll have influence to speak and to teach in the area where you grew up, John. Not only the new places. So there's all of that. Pictures, actual pictures from New Jersey. And that was on there. And there's one other thing, but I found it interesting because it was a reminder. It was a reminder of, like, to me, of God's promises. Oh, and I had one, that old street light. I also have, I bought it, one, a bigger one. Go through the house here. And this is my other, like, study. Let's see, I don't know if you can see it. Okay? And here I got a lot of scriptures, a lot of verses, a lot of friends. From the first few years I started going back to New Jersey. And that, dwell in the land of your fathers. You will have influence in the land of your fathers. And I wanted to share those things as just sort of like God. I've been reading through the Old Testament, New Testament, and I finished Matthew, and you have at the end what's called the Great Commission, where Jesus, after his resurrection, says, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Command them to obey all the things that I've taught you, all the teachings I've given you. Baptize them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And so Jesus gives to us to go in all the nations. And nations are also not just actual nations, which they are, which we understand, but there's all people groups that we're to influence, okay? All types of ethnic groups or ethnos. And in the history of Christianity, which I cover a lot, there are also interesting ways that the gospel, that Jesus has influenced other groups in ways that to us we might not be comfortable with. I have my friend Brother Bear. And Bear, I have not seen him in a while because he's the Native American Indian. But Bear used to be here in this area called Flower Bluff for years. And it's sort of like the history of my other friends. But I didn't know Bear that well. I knew a lot of the other guys. But Bear managed to get off the streets. And he changed his life. But also, he has an American Indian background, just like Pops. So, over time, Bear I must have gave him my card once here at Church Without Walls, a street ministry here in Flower Bluff. But I would get texts, me with the calls that I never answered. And finally I said, "Who is this?" And he said, "Brother Bear." And I barely remembered him because I met him that one time. Then we became friends. But Bear, he is involved more into he gave me the paperwork to read it once, and I was not aware of it, but it's actually a church, sort of a Christian movement that's started from the American Indian community. And I had more understanding. At first I thought that, because a lot of Christian preachers, they would not work with, they would not be open. They would normally rebuke, because there's a lot of spiritism and things that are certainly not Christian that you find in some of these other religions that Christians are forbidden really to have any part of. But at the same time, we're understanding that the gospel can reach into cultures that sometimes we're not comfortable with, and they could reach in ways that maybe we're not. The same thing has happened in Islam. I might discuss that. Not all of Islam, but some of Islam. There was a movement. And in Bear's Native American church, I read it, how it started, and he showed it to me. And it was an Indian person who had like a vision. I forget the whole story, but it was of Christ, and and so it was interesting when I read it. And I started just not judging Bear when I first, but then one day, and when I'm with him, I do the Christian ministry, obviously. And he showed me one day some paperwork from the church, his American Indian church, the movement. And Bear told me, "You're whatever," I forget the name he had, but it was some like Indian name. And I said, "Well, what is that, Bear?" And I read it, and it was like a description of me. It said, "God will send to us certain Christian pastors and ministers. Oftentimes they will be on the radio, and they will have this, and they will speak to us, and they will not be judgmental of us, and they are sent to us from God." So they had a history that there will be some preachers that they're not going to listen to. Maybe they're not sent to them. But then there'll be others, it said, that will be like a voice to their community, to that American Indian church. And they even wrote about that, those people with those callings. And I thought that was so interesting. And in Islam, there was a movement, and it's still going on, where people were embracing Jesus, but they were not fully changing to Christian culture. And it's debated, and I'm not saying I fully agree with it, but in a sense it was like Christ himself, in a way, was going into that community without almost being embraced. This is not all Muslims, but there was some missionaries in the last few years that, as they were bringing the gospel, they were not requiring the Muslims to fully say, "You're forsaking all you understand as your culture, and you're not going to make a complete change in all of the whole idea of Christian orthodoxy and the history of Christianity and all of that." No, these were going in and saying, and this is Christ. Christ, mentioned in the Quran, is not taught in the same way, the same understanding that Christ we understand from the scriptures that we have as Christians. But some missionaries were saying, the Christ in your Quran, him we declare unto you. Okay? Paul at Athens, which I talked about. Him to the unknown God, him we declare. Now, in all of these types of endeavors of how can the gospel and how can Christ go and influence other people groups, ethnos, because you go in all the nations. Are we going into all the nations of the earth and simply comparing our understanding of Christianity and the history of it with these other movements, which also have long histories. And if it's just a matter of, there will be many Muslims, I think, that would be, just in general, that would be open to the gospel when some barriers come down. But if you approach, just in the area of conversion, but if you approach other groups in the sense of your whole culture and everything you've understood is going to be transformed, and you are basically going to be more of like a Western idea of Christianity and church. Many will never be open to that, but some would be open to the simple understanding of the gospel. You know, I read in the paper the other day, and it was a very short article hidden in the back page. It said 24 people were killed by terrorists. I think it was Saturday. Did you hear that? Was there a big thing? There were 14 killed in San Bernardino, California. It's very, very big. Oh, world news. Those that were killed in Paris. Very big. Very big. But these 24 were in Chad. Okay? And there were 2 suicide bombers. African people. I don't know if they were children or adults, but they came from the group called Boko Haram. So, hardly anything. Little article. You know, there's a lot of black people that say, why is there no big outrage when 24 on a Saturday are killed, which is more than those killed in some of the other incidents, and it's a side note. And many are saying, we must just not value the Africans, the black Africans, they're somewhat Africans, but we must not value the black African people like we value the Parisians or the Americans, because there's just no... And you got to wonder. And it was just a small article. And if I didn't myself realize, look, this is significant, just by the reading of the very small article in the back of the paper, like a footnote, you would actually not consider it a big thing because it didn't get the attention. And I thought about that. It made me wonder. Today I'm going to go and buy the food for Pops. And I'll probably just upload this today because I got a teaching video that I'm working on. I made Sunday, so. And I wanted to, I know I complained yesterday about some of that, and I didn't like it because, I think Pops manipulated a little, so I would go buy some stuff because he didn't want to check the balance of his food tank. He could have checked it. And I could tell when he said, well, you'll have to call and check, because he knew I wouldn't have held on to his food stamp card, and I wanted to I don't know when I'm going to drive away and do those things. That's the thing with me. There's it's like the fight or flight mentality. We used to study this in as EMTs, and sometimes people they either want to fight or they want to flight. But there's an aspect, that little image I showed you on the bottle cap. You'll go. There's verses that say, get out of the city and dwell in the fields, even in Babylon. And there I will be with you, and there I will deliver you from the hand of the enemy. There's a sense where, in our lives, I know what I'm 53, but I've just been wanting to go, like to nations, and to get out. And plane tickets are expensive, okay? The passport I have, I just saw the passport in my car, so I had to go to the car to get this little bottle cap with the kite, with the little street light, that all those images remind me of being in the north, going out. And I went to the car and I had my passport, which I found when it fell out of the glove box a few months ago. And I said, I want to renew this. And it's expensive a little bit, tickets to Europe and stuff are expensive. God's put in our hearts vision and destiny, okay? It's not all about us in the sense of keeping up with the Joneses type thing, okay? But it's us fulfilling the purposes that God has for us. Everybody that watches these videos, I want to read, did I read them both? Out of Jacob shall he come that shall have dominion. God had a purpose. Jacob was the tribe. Jesus comes all the way down from the tribe of Judah. Out of those verses, sometimes I change the verses. Those verses might actually be saying Judah in the Bible. Sometimes I change them, but it might say Jacob. And sometimes I'll change them for my own purpose when I'm putting them up, because Jacob reminds me also of a lot of the guys I pray for, okay, and the things and their reasons for that. But either way, it still works. It could be written, but sometimes I'll change them like that. Jesus comes as the Lion of the tribe of Judah, and of course that's the promise was made. I'll do a little teaching. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay, so yes, it does come through Jacob. There's always a line of the promised children, and then Jacob would have the 12 tribes. One of those tribes would be Judah. Scepter shall not depart from Judah. These were all Old Testament prophecies saying how Jesus would come through that lineage, through that offspring. I could teach a little, but I don't want to go too much on this. But God has put in us, He's got purposes for us. In Ezekiel, I was reading, Ezekiel's been good. I'm in the book of Ezekiel. Nevertheless, will I remember my covenant with thee in the days of thy youth? I wrote this. And I will establish unto thee an everlasting covenant. This says in Isaiah that in the beginning of our lives, God chose us for things. Behold, I will do a new thing. Shall you know it? God begins saying to us, now is a time where I fulfill things that I told you maybe in your youth. And there was a period of wilderness, the history of Israel. And God says, but now I begin fulfilling these things. And so the reason I was a little complaining about some of that yesterday is I want the freedom that whenever I wake up, I can just go, whether I'm going to drive across the country or whatever. I actually don't like having to get plane tickets, because then you can't just get up and get on the plane. You got to get them to 2 weeks ahead. And then even if I'm from New Jersey, wherever, then I'm waiting. Oh, I got, the flight back is a certain date. I don't like that. I don't know, I'll get up, I'll leave or whatever. Today I'm going to take care of that. You might see a couple of pictures. I might have done a video or two today, but if I'm going to post this today, I'm not going to do another one. You'll probably get the teaching one tomorrow. It's called The Mind of Christ, and I did it right after Sunday church, and so that'll go up. I want to wrap up some of these videos so I can be ready to go. These pictures I took when I was up there. You know that one, my friend Crow reposted that yesterday. I want to tell you about that picture in the land. That was a few years ago when I was in New York. I don't know that black brother. His name is Lonnie. But I was going either back into the Port Authority bus terminal from my walks in Times Square and all. It was a few years back, that one. Or I was coming out, but I think I was going back in because I was smoking before I had to get in and be on the bus and not smoke until I got back to Jersey. And Lonnie, that black brother, he was drunk. And he must, he's from New York City. I'm sure he runs into people that are tourists. And I'm not a tourist, I've not been there, so I have the Texas accent to this. But, that's my area. So he was in the street kind of like rowdy and scaring the tourists, And I think he was trying to get a few dollars. And I was just sitting there smoking. And I'm not real good with some of those things, but I'm just sitting there smoking. And then he was saying, they want to put my black ass back in jail. They want something like that. And then I forgot if he said something, and I got up, I wasn't, and I said, who wants to put you in jail, brother? Who wants to put your black ass in jail? So he saw I was talking to him. And then he comes over, but I'm just like I'm part of those guys. And he could see that, no, this guy is not like doing the normal response. And he asked me, he said, "You a cop?" Because I'm right there talking to him like, "Oh, you know." I said, "No, I'm not in that." I said, "I do ministry, Lonnie." I said, "I grew up here in New Jersey." And I talked to him for about 5-10 minutes. And I could see some of he was drunk, but I could see some of that other stuff was a show to kind of scare people. And he was asking for money. And I just talked about the Lord a little bit, not much. And he said, "You know, John," he said, "you know why I'm not in jail today?" I said, "No, tell me." He said, "Because of God." So he has a history growing up there. He even said at the end, I remember this is 4 years ago now, that picture. He said, "Man, I'd like to go back to Texas with you." And I thought, isn't that funny? 15 minutes. I know they're not real serious, but a lot of my Texas friends tell me, "I'd like to go to New Jersey with you, John." He said, "But they'd shoot my black ass." I said, "They wouldn't shoot you, Lonnie." And then at the end I said, "I'm going to take a picture, brother." He said, "Okay, I do it on." He says, "Let's take one together." And I grabbed some kid off the street, some tourist. I said, "Take our picture." And that was it. 15 minutes. Jesus says, "Go preach the gospel to every creature. Get out of this city and dwell in the fields. Don't live so isolated, so inside of our own." That's it. And Shannon, my friend Crow, I saw it. He reposted it. He must have looked at my pictures on Facebook and just reposted it. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace.